So welcome to the talk on advanced order fulfillment. My name is Jared Kipe. I am the president of Odoo and a developer at Odoo. We're a US-based gold partner in Washington State. Okay, so already off to a great start. Multiple warehouses from an employee perspective. So this is an employee at your company. Oh, I should actually ask, how many people have more than one warehouse right now in their company or Odoo implementation? Pretty good amount, not quite half. How many are planning on implementing a new warehouse to add to their existing warehouse or anything anytime soon? Yeah, all right. And how many are fielding questions kind of daily basis about like how much is shipping and when is my order going to be there and stuff like that on customer service reps? That's got to be more than just two people. So from your employee perspective, ultimately what your customer service people are dealing with are kind of a bunch of questions going around in their head and a bunch of questions coming in from the customer. So where they are is the most important thing, right? So geolocation is kind of typically the answer to that. Can any one warehouse fill the order? When you have an order of a couple lines and stuff, that's usually pretty easy. If your orders get longer though, sometimes it's a little harder to tell if that's possible. And it's especially hard to tell if a set of warehouses can fulfill it, right? So if you have an item that's available only in one warehouse, then automatically you're going to, great. You're already going to have to kind of work around that problem. What is the closest warehouse goes down to the where is the customer again. Usually, or a lot of times it's pretty obvious, but it's not always obvious. Like, is Colorado closer to Pennsylvania than it is to Washington State? I don't know, right? What is the shipping cost? Obviously, so especially if you have to plan an order into multiple orders or multiple shipments and stuff, combining that shipment cost is very important if you don't want to build in a lot of margin on your shipping to try to eat that. And importantly, when will it ship out, right? So different warehouses across your country might be in different time zones. They might have different order cutoffs depending on the carrier that's picking them up and things like that. When will it arrive? Obviously, the number one question that customers are asking these days is basically what day is it going to show up? So if they're, going to a park or something like that, they're going to need to have their, stove or whatever that they got to order ahead of going to camp or whatever. So it's a very important question. So from a customer perspective, the customers that are calling in are asking questions. What does it cost? Again, and when will it arrive? And that's pretty much it, right? The answer to both of those is obviously the cheaper and the faster, pretty much all the time. So some configuration tasks in our module. We're specifically here to talk about our Sale Planner, which is a module that provides answers to these questions in a lot of ways. Warehouses have a bunch of configurations, so which one is eligible? You might have manufacturing or retail warehouses that you don't want to ship orders and you need to be able to prevent that from happening. What is their location, specifically in relationship to the customer, like how close are they to the customer and things, and what hours do they ship. So if you've got a warehouse on the East Coast, it's going to have its own hours, right? So on delivery methods, we have somewhat similar things. We need to be able to kind of reject shipping methods. I don't know about you guys, but most databases I've been in have a big long list of shipping methods. Oftentimes there's a bunch of one-off freights and stuff like that. You don't want to plan all of those. You only want to plan the ones that are typical for a customer order. And delivery carriers, methods, whatever you want to call them, they oftentimes have their own hours as well. And that can be different for every different method too. FedEx in particular, their ground commercial product is like Monday through Friday, but their residential product is Tuesday through Saturday. And so if you're answering the question of when it's going to arrive, you really need to be able to know those. Products. So there's the ability to override on a product level or product category level similar kinds of concerns. Like you might have a perishable product that you have to ship only from the closest location. So does you no good to make a back order at a location that isn't going to be able to carry it ever. Same thing with the specific warehouse, right? You might manufacture out of a warehouse and you will never ship it out of the closest warehouse. Like you always have to ship it out of the warehouse that you actually manufacture out of. Same thing for delivery methods, right? Lighter, more fragile items and stuff might be cheaper to ship with a cheaper carrier, but you might not allow that because that carrier doesn't have enough insurance, and they won't really cover the costs on that. So all of these kind of go together to try to automate and reduce the amount of shipping costs that it costs to deliver. So with that in mind, we'll start with the first place. We'll go to warehouses. And as you can see in my current database, I have 2 warehouses. I have a West Coast and an East Coast. Effectively, they have their own addresses, and that's always very important. They should always have a specific address. And over in the geolocation area, they've already been geolocated. And that piece is important because by convention, we don't geolocate a address or a warehouse so that you could theoretically mess with these numbers a little bit if you wanted to, but we do customers. They also have a new field over here for the shipping calendar. Shipping calendar is just like any other resource calendar for the most part. The numbers on it ultimately are kind of more, first of all, they're in a time zone, and that should probably be the time zone that the resource is in to kind of keep things logical. And the hour worked from and to are really, the work to is the most important one because it's kind of like your cutoff, right? So if an order comes in on Saturday, it's going to be planned Monday by the cutoff. So if you've got specific carrier requirements, like your FedEx Express picks up earlier and stuff, then your work to is likely going to be that's going to be the most important piece for you to be able to make sure that the order that actually gets planned for that day actually leaves the warehouse on that day. If you don't have confidence in that, things are going to get rocky pretty fast. There are all calendars have leaves, and it's very important because ultimately warehouses are closed on certain days, holidays. They might be closed just for maintenance and things like that as well. And again, for planning purposes, you don't want an order to kind of sit and wait for a day that's never going to come, kind of a thing. All right, we can go to delivery methods as well. So these also have a couple extra fields, but the most important one here is FedEx, or is the delivery calendar. So I've got a pretty typical delivery calendar here. Same thing about leaves. FedEx posts their leaves that their holidays that they won't be shipping or picking up on and stuff, and you should factor that in. Because in effect, these days are really the amount of time that it will take the carrier to get there, or rather the days that the carrier considers to be days, right? So if FedEx says that it's going to be 2 days, then they're 2 of what days? They're these ones, right? So the upper bound on this is less important. It's more just about getting the date right than it is about getting the time right. You'll also note that we have USPS here, which is an integration that we have through stamps.com as well. So with all of the kind of basic configuration out of the way, we can start making scenarios and kind of answering questions. So this is should have probably not cleared that. This is a Washington state address, and we have a warehouse in Washington. So we're going to expect that, if at all possible, really want the order to land in the Washington warehouse and to ship from there. So let's go ahead and edit this and add a product. I conveniently have a couple of products that only have stock in one warehouse. They're not set up specifically to only ship from the warehouse, but they only have inventory in the warehouse. So if I choose the warehouse stock one here, we can come up to the plan button, which is really where the magic begins. And we hit this and hope that the internet works, because that piece is going to be important for this talk. All right. So we get back a plan, and what a plan is just the options that you can ship and kind of quote out. So we have our 2 carriers that we have, and we have their shipping price come through. We have a plan date, which is that date in the warehouse that it's actually going to leave, and we have the requested date, which is effectively the date that we would promise to the customer, that effectively this will be here by the 3rd if you order before 4 p.m. in this particular case. If we edit this product and we change it to our warehouse 2, anybody want to guess what warehouse it's going to come from? Huh. So it got planned to warehouse 2, which means that the time is different because it's in the time zone of that particular warehouse, and so it's earlier in the day. And it's ultimately going to take a little bit longer as well and cost more money. So to choose any one of these plans, we can just use select here. It will fill in the delivery method on the sale order. It will add the delivery method line down here on the sale order. And ultimately, it also set the warehouse to the actual warehouse that it will ship out of, and set the 2 dates here for when it's going to plan, or rather when the shipping team should be shipping it by, and the requested date, aka when you could promise that the order will actually arrive. So if we go ahead and confirm this order, we will get a picking. And probably unsurprisingly, it's going to be in the second warehouse, and it's going to have the planned date that came from the sale order. All right, so now we can, well, actually, I should point out that if we duplicate this, some of you might have noticed, well, that's not going to work. Fun fact, if you have the delivery method already filled out, then it'll only plan for that particular delivery method. So you can kind of short circuit the carrier selection part there. So I actually need to clear that out. But you might have noticed earlier that when I hit plan, we don't have any transit days and requested days for FedEx, and that seems like a pretty important piece for this. So I'm going to take this as an opportunity to go over and talk about how some of these things work. We have a module called Deliver EBU, and that this provides mechanisms and kind of mechanism, really, for lack of a better word, to be able to discover things about the picking that's in progress. For example, a drop ship doesn't ship from your warehouse, but it'll look like it if you make a label out of Odoo. So a drop ship with this installed will come from the actual drop shipper and will go to the person who's drop shipping to. It also provides return label mechanisms. So if you're doing an inbound receipt from a customer, it'll be coming to your warehouse and not going out of your warehouse. And ultimately, those mechanisms are shared and presented up for any carrier to use. So we have a patch on the standard EBU or standard Odoo FedEx integration to provide all those mechanisms. And it also gives us the transit dates that we're looking for. So once that installs, it should just take a minute here, we'll go over and plan, and we'll notice some things, some new things. I'm sorry?
You have to have the base FedEx installed as well as the patch version?
Yes, so it's a patch on the Odoo shipping integration. So yeah, you have to have the Odoo shipping integration, and ours one layer above that. All right, so if we go back to our sale order and hit plan now, assuming once again the internet is working, we will get, well, Oh, okay. So this is actually this is a small problem actually, which is that if we tried to get a ground rate right now, we won't be able to. That's because our patch also passes the residential flag, which is not offered normally. So we have to make a small modification to our ground in this particular case for this particular address. If it was a actual commercial address, it would work okay, but we're going to switch this to the ground home delivery option. And now our plan should actually work just fine. So we will take off, quotes. We will take off that, although we could have used it, and we'll hit plan. And we should get our transit days, which is quite a bit longer from warehouse 2 or from the East Coast than it is for USPS or quote stamps.com delivery. All right, so now we should kind of talk about slightly more advanced scenarios. So one of them, and the most important, is obviously what happens if you have to split a shipment. So if I had a product that's only available in one warehouse, keep in mind our sale order is set to warehouse 2 at this point, then we'll see that we don't have the inventory for it, and a little convenient pop-up. And for only 2 lines, that's really not so bad. You could pretty much figure that out. But when you get to a bunch of lines, it's more important to be able to actually know which items to preferentially land items in the closest warehouse, but also prefer to be able to actually ship or ship the whole order as fast as possible. So we have a kind of sub options view over here. The SKU of these products just happens to correspond with the SKU or the warehouse short code, which is why it looks like that. Otherwise, this is basically a list of the warehouse mapped to the items that would actually ship on that order, or that from that warehouse rather. Including their date plan, their requested date, and their transit dates from those 2 warehouses. So from warehouse 1, we have 1 item coming from it, and it's only going to take a day, and it's 13:59 56, etc. But it's going to take significantly longer for the second one. So the overall plan is really kind of amalgam of them. The requested date is the latest date in this case of the two, and the transit day is the greatest of the transit days, and the shipping price is combined, right? So we can take one of these orders. In this case, it's going to be just straight up better to use USPS. It's cheaper and it's faster from both warehouses, so I'm going to select that. And now some kind of different things changed. So number one, the warehouse got set back to warehouse 1, and that is because it is the physically closest warehouse to the customer. And the plan date and request date got set as we saw them on the plan earlier. On the order line, though, we have a kind of override plan date and an override warehouse per line. That can be useful for reporting purposes, because if you look at a list of sale order lines, then effectively any line with a plan date and a warehouse is basically it's non-optimal, I guess you could say, line, because it's not coming from the closest warehouse. It in fact had to be split up. So with that in mind, we can go ahead and confirm this sale order. And we have 2 pickings. And in fact, those pickings are at the times that they kind of started out. And ultimately, they have the products on them that they had on the sale order as well. So with all of that kind of in mind, we can kind of start working on some even more advanced, or in this case, product level. Got a company suddenly. Product level configuration. So for example, if we can take a look at a product here, which is warehouse any stock. I have inventory in both warehouses for this particular item, which means that obviously if we plan, what warehouse are we going to get? Anybody? Guesses? Closest warehouse, right? So it's going to be the nearest warehouse, West Coast warehouse in this case, and we have basically the same details that we saw earlier for a very similar item. So I can override some planning policy on this product. So down here on the order planning policy, which is empty right now, I can make one. So for example, I could say only warehouse 2, for example. Maybe this is an item that's only produced in warehouse 2 and can only be shipped from warehouse 2. So I'll pop that open. We have a warehouse filter and a carrier filter, which we'll get to in a little bit, but I'll say warehouse 2 only, which is this is just a standard domain filter mechanism that's available anywhere. Hit save, and we'll hit save. You can and probably should do that on the category level because ultimately it's easier to maintain if you have fewer of the planning policies and fewer locations that a planning policy overrides whatever you're doing. So that's best practice. So ignore what I'm doing. To a certain degree. So with the only warehouse 2 filter set up, then obviously when we plan, we're going to get which warehouse? Warehouse 2. Yes. So we're back to the bad transit times and stuff like that we were expecting over there. We can go one step further. We can go ahead and edit that planning policy. I won't make a new one. I'll just edit this one and say that we only take FedEx, which would be for potentially an item that's small and fragile that would traditionally, most of the shipping kind of planning or whatever would usually pick the cheapest and usually pick the wrong one because in this case, this item might be damaged or something like that too easily and we need more insurance. So we'll note that the only options available at this point obviously are the FedEx one coming from warehouse 2. Likewise, there is a checkbox which we probably don't really need to get into, but there's always plan closest warehouse, and that is in particular useful for like perishable items or items that you source locally to that warehouse. Because you wouldn't necessarily want a back order something in some other warehouse. You always only want that back order in the closest warehouse, so you don't really need to go into that one. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Yes?
Filters at the customer level for the carriers?
So the question is there filters at the customer level? There is not, but that's theoretically possible to add something like that, sure. Or a default planning policy for the customer kind of a thing.
Yeah, sometimes they want you to build their account.
Oh, so actually for that, we actually do have something. So the The Odoo delivery that I was mentioning earlier has a out-of-the-box implementation of that mechanism for specific account numbers for specific customers that actually get billed when they make labels. So I don't have the FedEx one installed. Let's discard, and go and get it real fast. Any other questions while I'm doing that?
I do.
Yes.
The commercial versus the residential.
Yes.
Do you have to like go and manually trigger that all the time, or can you set that up?
Oh no, you'd make two. So you'd have a FedEx ground commercial and you'd have a FedEx ground home, and you'd let both plan because one of them will just drop off because it's not allowed. And that happens automatically because when you send a payload out to the carrier with a residential flag, if it's not a residential address, it just comes back with an error, and the planner will just eat the error and discard it. So that's actually one of the reasons why I specifically added that and hit the get rate button so that I could see the error, because planner doesn't show you errors; it only shows you success. All right, so sales purchase over here. I don't actually know the requirements for FedEx. I suppose that's important. How many characters the account number needs to be. We'll find out in a second. 9. It needs to be 9. All right, so with that little mechanism set up, you can name them, that's what the description's for, but without the description on the sale order now, if I go make a sale order for that same partner, then over in my shipping accounts, I see a new drop down for that specific FedEx shipping account. And ultimately, if we want to make an order real fast, we'll just confirm it. Doesn't really matter which warehouse it goes to at all at this point. We'll see also on the carrier information over here that we have brought that shipping account over. And again, if you're using one of we have patches for FedEx and UPS, and we have our own USPS and GSO integration and stuff like that. If you use those, then that mechanism will work automatically, basically. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there a website integration for this? I'm curious.
So actually, that's an interesting question. We haven't done that inside of Odoo. We have done it in other platforms. So like Magento and stuff, we have that will, instead of providing your FedEx or UPS details in Magento to get a rate, you instead just point it to Odoo and give it, some configuration for what locations it's allowed to use and stuff, and it'll just send back basically plan options. So we have done that before, but we don't have anything available for it, unfortunately. It's possible. It's done very, very generically at the planning level in such a way that no Odoo objects are touched while it's doing it, so it doesn't actually change the sale order while it's planning it, but it mocks like it's changing the sale order, because you do have to, for all those carrier integrations, you have to effectively pass them sale orders. So we pass them fake orders, sale orders, meaning that it's easy to plug in from an outside source just with what looks like an order, not really an order. Okay, does anybody do any local delivery out of their warehouses? Does anybody want to see local delivery out here? So we got a little bit of time here, and there aren't so many questions going. So routes, sale order delivery routes. So with this module installed, we have some new things on the warehouse and their delivery routes. And the idea behind them is that basically you have a customer that's in your locale, and you have kind of zones or areas that your delivery routes run. So if we go to warehouses again, and we go to only this one warehouse, if we go into routes here, actually that's not the right kind of routes. I think I may have to be in debug for this. It's been a little while since I've set up a delivery route, or delivery carry route. Something's not right. So I didn't plan to do that anyway, so that's part of it. But you'd have effectively a list. I thought it would be either on the sale order. Do you happen to know, Kaylee? It's just not working. All right. So in a kind of summation of that, right? We already saw plenty of these, but let's go ahead and duplicate a new one here and hit plan. We'll have a new column for delivery route. We don't have any delivery routes set up for that warehouse, and we don't really have any for any of them. But the idea is that every delivery route would have kind of a point that is the source of it, or like the kind of central point, right? So then every geolocated customer will be closest to one of a set of any one warehouses, and that's basically the route that they get. And then we display that on the picking view as well, so that you can group your pickings and stuff by delivery route and make batches and stuff for that delivery route to actually fulfill. Last chance for questions? Yeah, sure.
How do you handle complex packaging rules?
Packaging holds?
Rules. You have a set of 20 items of various different.
So Odoo has, so the question is how do we handle complex packaging rules? Odoo has packaging actually out of the box. So the delivery carriers have a default package that they'll try to use, and that's mostly for like limits and stuff on the box. But then individual items can have their own packaging that may be a package of 6 or just specific packaging requirements. And when you have that enabled, you can actually pick the packaging on the sale order line, and that's effectively how that works. So it doesn't really. There's no part of that interacts with sale order planner though. It's just kind of the stock mechanisms for packaging.
Like sometimes we have packages, sometimes we have pallets.
Sure.
Like LTL, and then once you have an LTL, you can deal with lift gate.
Sure, absolutely. So different freight options and stuff for sure you have to always think about for the address type and stuff, right? So you need to know if the address requires liftgate before you can use the right delivery carrier that has the liftgate fee or whatever on it. A lot of people just charge fees for that too, just flat item fee for liftgate or whatever, instead of using a carrier. Yeah, I mean, my personal preference is to use, off-the-shelf carriers like USPS and UPS and FedEx and stuff, and we've worked with all those. As I mentioned, we have more carrier integrations. Like we've got GSO, Golden State something overnight, maybe Golden State overnight that operates on the West Coast, but they're very cheap compared to FedEx and stuff, which is a good thing, and they offer really good rates over there. All right. Thank you.